The desert stretched endlessly, shimmering under the relentless midday sun. The convoy moved cautiously along the cracked, dusty road, each vehicle kicking up a cloud of sand that hung in the air like smoke. Sergeant Elena Carter, her helmet tightly strapped, scanned the horizon with trained eyes. The terrain was barren, desolate, and beautiful, but she had learned long ago that beauty in war often hid death. "Carter, all clear?" Her squad leader's voice came faintly over the radio. "Affirmative," she replied, though something in her gut told her otherwise. The desert had an uncanny way of holding its breath before chaos erupted. A sudden explosion shattered the uneasy calm. The lead Humvee flipped violently, flames licking the sky, metal twisting with a deafening roar. Elena hit the ground instinctively, sand and debris covering her face. Screams and gunfire erupted immediately, filling the air with terror and smoke. "Ambush! Ambush! Take cover!" someone yelled. Elena rolled behind a destroyed vehicle, checking her squad's positions. Her heart raced, but her mind went into automatic mode, assessing threats, calculating escape routes, planning next moves. She could see enemy fighters emerging from the dunes, armed with rifles and rocket launchers, coordinated and deadly. "Carter, fall back!" the squad leader shouted. But before she could respond, another explosion ripped through the convoy, sending shrapnel into the sand around her. Her ears rang, and for a moment, the world was reduced to flashing red and orange fireballs. When she regained her bearings, the convoy was decimated. Smoke rose in thick black columns. Twisted metal and broken bodies littered the road. Her squad, friends, brothers in arms, were either unconscious, wounded, or worse. Elena's stomach twisted at the realization. She was alone. Her comms crackled with static. No one responded. She swallowed hard. Panic would get her killed. She checked her gear, rifle intact, sidearm loaded, grenades secured. Supplies were limited, enough for a firefight, not a war. And then she remembered the mission. The classified objective, the one she had trained months for. Deep in enemy territory, a communications outpost relayed. The desert stretched endlessly, shimmering under the relentless midday sun. The convoy moved cautiously along the cracked, dusty road, each vehicle kicking up a cloud of sand that hung in the air like smoke. Sergeant Elena Carter, her helmet tightly strapped, scanned the horizon with trained eyes. The terrain was barren, desolate, and beautiful, but she had learned long ago that beauty in war often hid death. "Carter, all clear?" Her squad leader's voice came faintly over the radio. "Affirmative," she replied, though something in her gut told her otherwise. The desert had an uncanny way of holding its breath before chaos erupted. A sudden explosion shattered the uneasy calm. The lead Humvee flipped violently, flames licking the sky, metal twisting with a deafening roar. Elena hit the ground instinctively, sand and debris covering her face. Screams and gunfire erupted immediately, filling the air with terror and smoke. "Ambush! Ambush! Take cover!" someone yelled. Elena rolled behind a destroyed vehicle, checking her squad's positions. Her heart raced, but her mind went into automatic mode, assessing threats, calculating escape routes, planning next moves. She could see enemy fighters emerging from the dunes, armed with rifles and rocket launchers, coordinated and deadly. "Carter, fall back!" the squad leader shouted. But before she could respond, another explosion ripped through the convoy, sending shrapnel into the sand around her. Her ears rang, and for a moment, the world was reduced to flashing red and orange fireballs. When she regained her bearings, the convoy was decimated. Smoke rose in thick black columns. Twisted metal and broken bodies littered the road. Her squad, friends, brothers in arms, were either unconscious, wounded, or worse. Elena's stomach twisted at the realization. She was alone. Her comms crackled with static. No one responded. She swallowed hard. Panic would get her killed. She checked her gear, rifle intact, sidearm loaded, grenades secured. Supplies were limited, enough for a firefight, not a war. And then she remembered the mission. The classified objective, the one she had trained months for. Deep in enemy territory, a communications outpost relayed enemy movements across the region. Destroy it, and she would cripple their operations. fail and countless lives, including civilians, could be lost. Her hands clenched around her rifle. "I finished this," she whispered. No one was left to stop her, no one left to advise her, no one left to argue. Elena moved through the desert with purpose, using the terrain for cover. Every dune, every rock became a shield. The sun dipped lower, painting the sand in deep reds and oranges as she approached enemy lines. Finally, in the distance, she spotted the outpost perched on a rocky ridge, heavily fortified. Guard towers loomed overhead, floodlights sweeping the desert like deadly eyes. Soldiers patrolled with precision, and she realized a frontal assault would be suicide. Her mind raced. Then she spotted her opening, a supply truck headed toward the checkpoint, its driver distracted and the guards barely giving it attention. A plan formed instantly. Elena moved swiftly, silently, intercepting the truck at a blind spot outside the perimeter. Within seconds, she incapacitated the driver and donned his uniform. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, every step calculated. The guards barely glanced at her. She handed over the forged papers she had taken from the driver. For a tense moment, the guards studied her face, the papers, then her face again. Finally, one nodded and waved her through. Inside the compound, Elena's nerves remained taut. She merged with the workers and soldiers, each step bringing her closer to the communication center. Every door, every hallway, every shadow was a potential threat. Finally, she found it, a reinforced door, armed and secured, the heartbeat of enemy operations. She placed explosives at precise points. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but adrenaline. A sudden shout froze her. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here!" She turned to see a guard stepping into the hallway. Seconds stretched like hours. Her instincts took over. She disarmed him and knocked him unconscious before he could raise the alarm. But the noise had been heard. Alarms screamed and red lights flooded the corridor. "Intruder! Lock down the base!" Elena gritted her teeth, no turning back now. She sprinted down the corridor, firing precisely to clear her path. Bullets ricocheted, sparks flying. Her breathing was steady, her movements efficient, one against dozens. She reached the perimeter with seconds to spare. The explosives were set. "Mission first," she whispered. She ran as the timer ticked down. Boom! The communications center erupted in flames, sending shockwaves across the desert. Mission complete, but escape was not guaranteed. Every enemy in the outpost was now hunting her, armed and relentless. Elena darted into the dunes, blending with shadows as darkness began to fall. She moved quickly, silently, knowing each passing second increased her chances of survival. The desert, once an obstacle, became an ally as she navigated through valleys and rocky ridges. Her mind replayed the morning, the laughter of her squad, the jokes, the camaraderie. Now the laughter was gone. Only the mission remained. Only survival remained. Night was approaching, the temperature dropped sharply. Elena had to find cover, and fast. Ahead, she spotted a small, hidden cave nestled in the rocks, a temporary sanctuary. She slipped inside, scanning every corner before lowering her rifle. Silence enveloped her, broken only by the distant hum of helicopters and searchlights sweeping the desert. Elena leaned against the cave wall, exhaustion threatening to overtake her. Her hands shook slightly, adrenaline slowly ebbing. She closed her eyes, if only for a moment, and remembered her training. Focus, patience, strategy. She wasn't just arriving, she was preparing for the next wave, the next fight, the next impossible challenge. Outside, the desert stretched like a silent predator, waiting. But Elena Carter wasn't finished. She had completed the mission alone, yes, but surviving the night would be an entirely different battle. And she was ready. The desert night was a different battlefield. The burning remains of the communications center cast an eerie glow across the dunes, illuminating the smoke and sand in violent shades of red and orange. Elena crouched low behind a ridge, her chest heaving, ears straining to catch every sound. The mission was complete, but survival? That was far from guaranteed. She could hear them, enemy soldiers moving systematically, searchlights sweeping across the desert like deadly eyes. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping the air with a deafening rhythm. "They're not giving up," she muttered under her breath. Elena checked her gear. Rifle? Check. Sidearm? Check. Ammunition? Barely enough for a few firefights. Every movement had to count. Every decision mattered. She moved like a shadow across the sand, using the terrain to her advantage. Every dune, every rock became a shield as she slipped past enemy patrols. One wrong step could mean discovery and death. Hours passed. Exhaustion gnawed at her muscles, but she refused to slow down. Her mind replayed the morning, the laughter of her squad, the camaraderie before the ambush, the moments that now felt like a lifetime ago. But there was no time to mourn. Every heartbeat brought her closer to being hunted down. Then she heard it, a low, metallic whine overhead. Searchlights swept the desert. One of them caught her silhouette for a split second. Target spotted! Gunfire erupted from all directions. Sand exploded around her, sending shards into her face. Elena dove behind a dune, rolling to her side as bullets whizzed past her ears. Her body moved instinctively, trained, precise, lethal. She crawled low, heart pounding, and reached for a flash grenade. Pin-poled, she lobbed it over the ridge. The bright flash and deafening bang disoriented the soldiers above. Shouts echoed in the desert as she slipped away, moving like a ghost. Deeper into enemy territory, she encountered a canyon, a narrow, jagged path between towering rock walls. Perfect cover, but also a trap. If the helicopters spotted her here, she'd be trapped. Elena sprinted into the canyon, hugging the walls. Bullets ricocheted off stone, dust filling her lungs. Her vision blurred, but she forced herself to focus. Every step, every breath, every movement was calculated. Then she saw it, a weak rock formation overhead. Risky, but it was all she had. She scaled the rocks quickly, planting her last explosive charge. The helicopter's blades hummed closer. With a deep breath, she pulled the trigger. Boom! The canyon erupted in a massive rock slide. Dust and debris rained down. One helicopter barely escaped. The other was forced to retreat as the rocks sealed the canyon. Temporary victory, temporary safety. Hours passed as she pressed on, using the desert's shadows for cover. Cold crept into her bones. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Fatigue clawed at her mind. But Elena refused to stop. She knew the enemy would regroup, and if she faltered, it would be the end. Finally, she spotted a small cave hidden among the rocks. It was narrow, but it offered temporary sanctuary. She slipped inside, scanning every corner before lowering her weapon. Silence fell, thick, suffocating, but welcome. Her body ached, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from sheer exhaustion. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind drift. Memories came unbidden. Laughter with her squad, their jokes, the camaraderie, the plans for after the mission. Gone, all gone. She swallowed hard, her jaw tightened. She refused to break. Not here, not now. A faint sound drew her attention. Footsteps, outside the cave, close. Elena froze. Every muscle tensed. She gripped her knife, pressing her back into the shadows. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The footsteps approached, more than one. Her instincts screamed. They had tracked her. Peeking around a rock, she saw at least 10 soldiers moving cautiously outside the cave. They were searching systematically, eyes sweeping the desert floor like deadly eyes. Elena weighed her options. No ammo for a prolonged fight, no backup, no escape route. Her eyes scanned the cave's narrow interior. She could use it to her advantage. "If I'm going down," she whispered, "then I'm taking as many of them with me as I can." The soldiers moved closer. One stepped inside the cave. Elena's muscles coiled like a spring. In one fluid motion, she sprang from the shadows, knife slashing through the air. The soldier never saw her coming. Chaos erupted. Gunfire and shouts echoed in the cave as Elena fought with precision, each movement calculated. She kicked, rolled, and struck with lethal efficiency. One soldier down, two more tried to flank her, but she was faster, harder, smarter. The firefight was brutal, close quarters. Bullets whizzed past her ears, ricocheting off the rocks. Dust filled her lungs, sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't falter. Each enemy that came close found themselves outmatched, outsmarted, and outgunned, despite her limited ammo. Minutes felt like hours. The soldiers outside hesitated, unsure of what awaited them inside. Elena used the chaos to slip further into the cave, deeper into the shadows. Eventually, the cave narrowed, forcing the enemy to stop. Elena took the moment to catch her breath, heart pounding, muscles screaming. She checked her ammo. Minimal. Knife ready. Mind sharp. Outside, she could hear the soldiers regrouping, coordinating, planning the next push. They would return. They always did. Elena pressed herself against the wall, eyes scanning the darkness of the cave. She wasn't just hiding, she was strategizing. Every detail mattered. Every moment could mean life or death. Hours passed. She remained still, silent, invisible. The desert night stretched endlessly outside, illuminated by the fires of the distant outpost and the moonlight glinting on her gear. Alone, surrounded, outnumbered, but Elena Carter was not broken. She had completed the mission, she had survived the ambush, and now the desert would test her like never before. The cave was silent, but not safe. Every shadow outside hinted at danger, every distant footstep a predator closing in. Elena Carter pressed herself against the cold rock wall, her breathing shallow, ears straining. Her rifle was nearly empty, her sidearm low on bullets. One mistake, one misstep, and it would all end here. She scanned the cave. Narrow passages, jagged rocks, uneven floor, perfect terrain for an ambush if she used it wisely. Her eyes caught a pile of loose stones near the entrance, improvised weapons, explosives in her tack. A plan began forming. Survival was no longer just about shooting, it was about outsmarting, outmaneuvering, and striking fear. Outside, the enemy regrouped. Their shouts echoed through the canyon, footsteps crunching on sand and stone. They were methodical, closing in, confident that a lone soldier couldn't stand against them. Elena whispered under her breath, "They think I'm alone. They think I'm vulnerable." She tightened her grip on her knife and rifle. They're about to learn otherwise. The first soldier crept into the cave. Elena struck without hesitation, a swift jab of her knife, precise and lethal. The man dropped silently, his body blending with the shadows. She dragged him into a hidden corner, keeping him out of sight. Then she triggered a small trap, stones balanced precariously above the entrance. With a calculated kick, they crashed down, sending rocks tumbling and dust flying. Outside, soldiers shouted, confused. For a moment, chaos was on her side. She didn't wait. Elena sprinted deeper into the cave, using twists and turns to her advantage. Another group tried to follow, but the narrow passage forced them to slow down, making them vulnerable. She ambushed them with precision strikes, using rocks, her knife, and whatever she could find as weapons. Each enemy soldier fell, one by one. Her movements were a blur, silent, lethal, almost inhuman. But exhaustion was gnawing at her. Blood from minor cuts stung her hands, sweat poured down her face, and her lungs burned with every sprint. Then a harsh metallic sound, a machine gun from outside the cave. Bullets drilled into the rocks, sending sparks flying. Elena dropped flat, feeling the vibrations through her body. She realized the enemy had brought heavier weapons, planning to trap her completely. She needed an escape route, fast. Elena's eyes scanned the cave walls. A small ventilation shaft, barely wide enough to crawl through. It was risky, too tight, uncertain where it would lead, but at this point she had no choice. She crawled into the shaft, her rifle pressed against her chest, her body scraping against metal. Dust and debris filled the air. Outside, she could hear the soldiers moving closer, now aware she had slipped through the rocks. They were hunting her like wolves closing in on wounded prey. The shaft twisted and turned, and Elena emerged into a small alcove on the other side of the canyon. The night air hit her face. Freedom? Not yet, but a fighting chance. She paused, listening. The desert was alive with sound, the enemy searching systematically, the distant whine of helicopters returning, the occasional explosion from earlier. She had a plan, one final desperate move. She spotted an enemy supply depot down the ridge. Explosives, fuel, perfect chaos. If she could reach it without being seen, she could level the area, taking out dozens of soldiers in one strike. Elena moved like a ghost, hugging the rocks and shadows. Every step calculated, every breath silent. Hours of training, of instinct, led to this. Halfway to the depot, a patrol appeared. Elena froze, pressed against the rock wall. One soldier stepped too close. She waited until his shadow stretched past her. Then she struck, silent and lethal. The rest of the patrol never knew what hit them. At the depot, she worked quickly. She placed explosives on fuel barrels, timing them to detonate when the majority of enemy forces were nearby. Then she ducked behind a large crate, checking her surroundings. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline and exhaustion. Every second counted. Outside, the desert was crawling with soldiers, hunting for her, confident they would find her soon. The timer ticked down. 10, 9, 8. Elena peeked over the crate. Soldiers were moving toward her position, stepping carefully across the sand. They didn't know she was waiting. 7, 6. She aimed her rifle at a structural support near the center of the depot. When the timer hit 1, she fired a single shot. Boom. Flames erupted, sending soldiers diving for cover. Explosions ripped through ammunition caches, fuel barrels igniting in a chain reaction. Screams echoed through the canyon. Elena used the chaos to sprint across the open ground. She dodged bullets, rolling in the sand, disappearing into the shadows. One by one, enemy soldiers fell victim to her calculated path. Rocks, debris, traps, and well-placed shots. Minutes felt like hours. The entire canyon was in flames, smoke billowing, the night lit with orange and red fire. Elena finally reached a safe ridge overlooking the devastation. Her body was battered, bleeding, and exhausted, but she remained alive. She looked down at the destruction. Dozens of enemy soldiers incapacitated, the supply depot obliterated, and the communication lines disrupted. The mission was complete. But victory was hollow. Elena knew she couldn't stay here long. More reinforcements would come. She had to move, again. She paused for a moment, taking in the desert night, her body trembling with fatigue. Every instinct screamed at her, rest, recover, survive. But there was no time. Survival demanded action. Elena pressed forward, disappearing into the dunes, moving like a shadow. She was alone, outnumbered, but unbroken. Her resolve was unshakable. The desert had tested her, the enemy had hunted her, and she had survived. Her mind replayed the morning's events, her squad laughing, joking, believing in their mission. Now it was only her, alone. But Elena Carter wasn't just any soldier. She was trained to survive, to fight, to adapt, and no matter how impossible the odds, she refused to be defeated. The desert night stretched endlessly ahead. But for the first time, Elena felt a surge of hope. She had completed the mission. She had survived ambush after ambush. She had outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outlasted her enemies. And she was still alive. The desert was silent again, but only for a moment. Elena Carter crouched behind a jagged ridge, the glow of the destroyed supply depot fading behind her. Her clothes were torn, her body covered in sweat and blood, but her eyes burned with determination. She had completed the mission. The communications outpost was destroyed, enemy supplies obliterated, and countless soldiers incapacitated. But survival wasn't over. The enemy wouldn't let her go easily. Reinforcements would arrive, helicopters would circle again, and every shadow could hide a deadly threat. She tightened her grip on her rifle and scanned the terrain. Ahead, miles of desert stretched like a living labyrinth, dunes, jagged rocks, and hidden ravines. Her mind raced, calculating the fastest and safest route to friendly lines. The first sign of pursuit came within minutes. Small figures appeared in the distance, cautiously moving through the sand. Reinforcements. She counted at least 15 soldiers, heavily armed and coordinated. Elena's pulse quickened, but her movements remained calm, precise. She ducked behind a dune, adjusting her position. Bullets kicked up sand where she had just been seconds before. The enemy was closing in, expecting an easy kill. Not today. Using the shadows, she began to move laterally, zigzagging through the dunes. Her boots sank into soft sand, slowing her, but she used every advantage the terrain offered. The enemy spread out, trying to flank her. She reached a small canyon, its walls high and jagged, a perfect choke point. Elena smiled faintly. Desert and terrain had always been her ally. She placed a few leftover explosives at strategic points along the canyon's entrance. Then she ducked behind a large boulder, holding her breath as the first wave entered. Boom! The explosion rocked the canyon, throwing soldiers off balance and sending dust and debris into the air. Some were incapacitated, others disoriented. Elena used the chaos to sprint further into the canyon, knife and rifle at the ready. Hours passed as she navigated the treacherous terrain. Fatigue clawed at her, hunger gnawed at her, and dehydration threatened to cloud her mind. Every muscle screamed, every joint burned, but Elena refused to slow down. Survival demanded relentless focus, and she had trained for this. As dawn approached, the enemy's search efforts began to falter. They hadn't expected her to survive the night, to adapt, to fight back with illegal precision. The desert, her battlefield, had become her ally once more. By mid-morning, she reached a small ridge overlooking a valley. Below, a road, enemy vehicles occasionally patrolling. Beyond that, hope, friendly lines. But to reach them, she would need to cross open desert, exposed and vulnerable. Elena studied the patrol patterns carefully. Timing would be everything. She waited, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes tracking every movement. When the road was clear, she bolted, sand kicking up around her boots, moving faster than she thought possible. Bullets whizzed past. She rolled, ducked, and sprinted with every ounce of strength left in her body. The patrol scrambled, firing blindly, but she vanished into a ravine, out of sight. The final challenge came in the form of a riverbed. Though dry, it was a natural funnel. Enemy soldiers blocked the only exit. Elena's heart pounded. One last fight, one last gamble. She assessed her options: rocks overhead, debris around, narrow passages forcing the enemy to funnel through. Perfect. As they moved closer, she used every tactic she had learned: precision strikes, throwing sand into eyes, pushing rocks to create noise and confusion. One soldier after another fell victim to her lethal improvisation. By the time she emerged from the riverbed, the enemy had retreated, wounded and disoriented. She allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. Finally, in the distance, she spotted a friendly patrol. U.S. Army insignias gleamed in the morning sun. Tears stung her eyes, not from pain, but relief. She had made it, against impossible odds. Alone. She waved frantically, and the soldiers ran to her side, providing cover and support. Medics checked her injuries, giving her water and first aid. "You're lucky to be alive, Sergeant," one of them said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I wasn't lucky," Elena replied, voice hoarse but determined. "I survived." As she was escorted to safety, memories of the mission flooded her mind. The convoy destroyed, her squad lost, the enemy ambush, the communications center in flames. She had accomplished what no one else could. Against all odds, under heavy fire, she had completed the mission alone. Her body ached, every step a reminder of the night she had survived, but her spirit remained unbroken. She looked back at the desert, the vast and merciless landscape that had tested her in every way imaginable. She had conquered it. Back at base, Elena was debriefed. Commanders marveled at the intelligence she had gathered, the strategic advantage she had delivered, and the sheer courage she had displayed. Her actions would save countless lives, disrupt enemy operations, and inspire those who would follow in her footsteps. And yet she remained humble, quiet, determined. She hadn't done it for glory. She had done it because it was her mission, because it was the right thing to do, because she was a soldier. As night fell again, Elena stood on a ridge overlooking the desert. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery reds and purples. She was alone, but she was alive. She had fought, survived, and triumphed against impossible odds. For Sergeant Elena Carter, the desert had been a battlefield, a teacher, and a crucible. She had faced death, outsmarted it, and emerged stronger. The world would remember the mission, the destruction, the chaos, but for her, it was a personal victory, the survival of a soldier, a warrior, a one-woman army who refused to be broken. She turned back towards the base, walking tall despite exhaustion, carrying the pride and resilience of someone who had faced the impossible and conquered it.